over our heads are bills that are about suppressing the votes of black and brown and poor Texans and Americans. That creates a dark day in Texas. A day when elected officials can concoct a narrative that is obviously false. You would think that members of their own party would be saying, don't embarrass us like that. The fact that the claim of massive voter fraud is the alternative truth for determining the need for these oppressive and suppressive voter rights pieces of legislation. As stated, I'm Dr. James Dixon of the Houston NACP, pastor of the Community of Faith Church and presiding president of Kingdom Builders Global Fellowship. As we speak, 43 states in our nation are dealing with voter suppression legislation. That means that there is a conspiracy, a corrupt conspiracy nationally to oppress voters. We've come today in Texas to say that we're joining the nationwide and the statewide coalition of people who believe in justice, equality, and equity, who are calling for those laws to be voted down. Yeah. Our sacred right is worth the fight. 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 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had this to say about voting and voting rights. Give us the ballot, was his speech in 1957, which says, give us the ballot and we will quietly and non-violently, without rancor or bitterness, implement the Supreme Court's decision of May 17, 1954. Voting is a non-violent power. Yeah. Voting is a non-violent power. It's moral. It's just. So those who work to take away that right are doing the opposite. Their actions are immoral, unrighteous, and unjust. And we're here to say today to those who support unrighteous, immoral, unjust legislation, you will go down in history as those who sought to turn the clock back and bring Jim Crow back to Texas in 2021. And on behalf of these children who travel to Austin, Texas today, we are saying, don't embarrass yourself as those who would treat these children's future like they should not have the right to vote. Their great-grandparents suffered, bled, died, marched, and fought for the right to vote, so they would not have to have the same fight. And we're raising up a generation of freedom fighters, liberators, who understand that the call must be clear and the truth must be spoken to power. We're saying today in Texas, voters' rights up and voter suppression down. Empower those who empower us and disempower those who don't. How do you do that? At the ballot box. Vote people out who vote for voter suppression. We do that at the cash register. Don't buy where people disempower voting rights. We will call boycotts, we will strike, we will march until we get justice. And as said earlier, we know the victory is on our side because truth crushed to the ground will always rise again. And there's redemption in unearned suffering. We will have voting rights in Texas now and forever. Don't take the sacred right, because the sacred right for us is worth the fight.
Thank you, Brother Robert. Thank you so much, Bishop Dixon. The sacred right is definitely worth the fight for these young babies right here. My mother can vote today because we marched in the 60s. And as a result of that, we now have young ladies leading this battle, like Miss Diane LaFay of Black Voters Matters. You will hear from her now.
Hi, everyone. We know all too well the generational tactics of voter suppression that have plagued our communities for far too long. Black Voters Matter is committed to investing in the grassroots effort across the state of Texas that seeks to preserve the progress that was made by our forefathers. It is our responsibility to protect the rights that were purchased with the to ensure everyone has a seat at the table. We will not tolerate their attempt to silence our communities and will continue to make clear demands of our elected officials. There is no gray area when dealing with injustice, and those who hide behind the shadows will be forced to take a stand. We recognize this moment and will not let up until all of our communities have full representation and unlimited access to the electoral progress. We encourage you all to stay engaged with our calls to action, and we know that it's going to take all of us to win this fight. Nobody can do everything, but we all can do something.
She said that this right has been purchased by the precious blood of our ancestors. And who best to address that or segue into that than the namesake of one of the fathers of the movement, Dr. Frederick Douglass Haynes. Come on, Pastor.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think it was Chuck D who said these days we can't tell who's in cahoots because the KKK wears three-piece suits. Make the connection between January 6th, where we saw white supremacists literally determined to negate the vote of those who had expressed themselves in November. And they went to the United States Capitol in order to overturn the election, suppress the vote, if you please. And don't miss the connection between what they did January 6th and their ideological sisters and brothers in state capitals across this nation who are doing everything they can to ensure that only certain people vote. Those who are whiter, older, and wealthier, because they want to dress up apartheid, Jim and Jane Crow segregation in a tuxedo and with a bow tie. And we are simply saying the KKK and those who are engaged in these kinds of practices are basically the same. And we have come here to Austin to call them out. We have come here to Austin to make a moral appeal to those with a conscience, to recognize that what is happening right now is immoral, it's dead wrong, and it is anti-democracy. If democracy's essence is one person, one vote, then why is it that you have to engage in such suppressive tactics that already we live in a state that studies have shown is the most difficult state in the union to vote because of barriers that have been erected that preclude us from going to vote. And yet what happens this past November, we go to the polls en masse, and their response is not to look for ways to ensure that we have same-day voter registration. It's not to look for online voting like other progressive states, but instead, this state says, no, we can't have that many black, brown, and poor people voting. We've got to suppress the vote. We understand this game. It's a racist game. We understand this game because guess what? We are the children of those civil rights warriors who stood for us, shed blood for us. And because they did that for us, we recognize that we're going to win this game. We're going to win this game because they paid for us to get in this game. We're going to win this game because truth is going to always win out. We're going to win this game because if democracy is right, voter suppression is wrong. We are going to win this game because Dr. King was right. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. Glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. Y'all didn't feel King. Well, maybe you feel Kendrick Lamar. We gonna win this game because all our life we had to fight. But since God's got us, we gonna be all right.
Woo! Thank you, Bishop. Thank you, Bishop. What did he say? They were whiter, older, and wealthier. I heard that. I'm bringing up somebody to you right now that is blacker, that is younger, but that is also wealthy in her spirit and her passion for fairness, justice, and equity, and that would be Miss Shakira Dennis of New Waves Cares. Come on, Shakira.
No, it's fine. I'm not going to get you. I promise. First, thank everyone for being here. I do want to acknowledge Bishop Dixon, Pastor Haynes, our faith leaders, for standing in solidarity, and also our young leadership, our civic leaders, our grassroots organizations who came together because, rightfully so, this is something that we should be standing together against. House Bill 6 and Senate Bill 7 is a direct violation of our constitutional right to vote. It goes without saying. Continue to stand by while legislators who by all means should be identifying more creative avenues for us to vote easily and to participate in our civic process are now saying, let's overcomplicate this process. I hail from Harris County, Texas, home of drive-through voting, home of 24-hour voting, home of the very catalyst for this bill. Right? We witnessed record voter turnout numbers, right? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with everyone taking up in arms and having their voices heard at the ballot box? There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And we cannot stand by and turn a blind eye or turn the other cheek while our rights are being trampled upon. It goes without saying. Earlier today at the press conference, we saw many generations come together. Young, our elders, our faith leaders, our grassroots organizations, advocacy groups saying this is a no, right? This legislation is wrong. And other legislators who come here, and we have a part-time legislator. There's so many other issues, health care, education, criminal justice reform, just to name a few, right, that we should be on the front lines combating, but yet we have to take time because people want to turn us back 30, 40, 50, 60 years because they can't stand young black and brown folks or African-American-led communities coming to the ballot box to have their voices heard. Again, we have to stand in solidarity against this piece of legislation. We have to slow the process. We have to hold those accountable who we know, our calendars committee, right, our corporate community, others who are sitting by and have the power to speak up, to help the organizations and groups and individuals that are here today amplify our message and to ensure that this legislation is not passed on our watch because we're doing our part in our communities. And we can't drive to Austin every time someone says, you know what, we want to trample on your voting rights, right? This is the season. We can't do that. We shouldn't be dealing with these issues right now. So I want to thank, again, everyone who took the time out of their days, who took off work to drive all the way down here to Austin to say, please, let me vote. Let me participate in the process that is rightfully due to me by way of the Constitution. So thank you all.
Wow. Great job. Great job. Woo. So I love our young black women. I also love our young black men. I'm about to bring one up to you right now in the form of Minister Dominique Alexander, from the founder of the New Wave, Next Wave generation out of Dallas. Come on, Dominique.
So I've always said I hate speaking behind my pastor. It seems I'm doing this more often. My name is Minister Dominique Alexander, president and founder of the Next Generation Action Network. And we are here again for another sad occasion. I echo the words of many people who have said we could be here focusing on many things other than this situation. Just like a good friend said, Chaz, there is billions of dollars in the state coffers that should be released to education system, while our education system is failing right now in the state of Texas. While we're trying to get funding to school districts in Houston and Dallas, San Antonio, and rural areas. But yet the number one agenda in the state of Texas is the right to vote. The number one agenda is for Governor Greg Abbott is to impede on our right to vote with no facts, no statistics to back their agenda. The only fact is that black and brown people are outnumbering them in the ballot box.
Come on.
And Governor Hot Wheel, as we call it, agenda is only to yet impede on our right to vote because he don't see himself winning in 2022. He don't want to see a Georgia happen in Texas. He don't want to see Houston, Harris County coming up with new ideas to make sure that everyone have the right to vote. Everyone has the access to vote. Things that will have Travis County and Dallas County and other municipalities that are blue counties do that same thing. This is the reason why we are here. We're not here because there's a real problem. We're here because they see the expiration date on their seat. So I would end just like I started the press conference. Like the late, great Fannie Lou Hamer said, if I am free, who is it to tell me how much freedom I should have? Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Alexander. We only have a couple more speakers. You know, I told you I couldn't vote when my mother was born. My mother couldn't vote when I was born. She also couldn't think of having a title back then as the lady that we are about to bring forward to you now. And that would be Miss Kamaya Factory, Executive Director, President of the Black Freedom Factory.
Thank you, everybody, for having me here today. My name is Kamaya Factory. I'm the President and Executive Director of Black Freedom Factory, an organization dedicated to data-driven activism, communal advocacy, and diversity and inclusion as it pertains to race relations in the city of San Antonio, Texas. I stand here today to urge you all to recognize that the youth are faced with something that our ancestors necessarily didn't have to see. And that is the habitual violence and execution of our people circulated on social media over and over again. Our youth, the future of voting, have to see George Floyd's breath leave him. They have to see Dante Wright shot at the expense of an air freshener. They have to see Ahmaud Arbery murdered for running in his neighborhood. This is circulated on their timelines over and over again. So I stand here today to remind you all that the youth, the future of the next vote, are watching history, are watching our people die countless times. Black Freedom Factory exists because the data is something, unfortunately, that the system and institutions listen to and validate, but the numbers don't lie. We have been suppressed. Our vote has been suppressed. It is time for the 14th Amendment of Equal Protections to extend to our communities and to extend to our people. Today we stand here because the baton has been passed to us by our ancestors. Our ancestors stand in solidarity with us today as we plead, but not plead. We fight. We fight for a right that was given to us. If you will not show us what democracy looks like, we will show you.
Come on.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed.
We almost could have closed out right now, but we're going to close out with a good preacher, Bishop Sheldon Beatty. After you hear from Bishop Sheldon Beatty, Bishop Dixon out of Houston will close out the press conference. Thank you all for coming today.
Thank you for all the organizers and all the pastors and other leaders that are standing here. Thank you for your words and sharing the sentiments of so many people. And for those of you who are participating by this viewing mechanism, thank you for participating, those who are carrying the message. It's a wonderful thing. I've been in Texas now over 30-some years, and one of the first messages that I received when I came on the highway was, don't mess with Texas. It said, don't mess with Texas. And so I came to tell you the same message you've been telling me for over 30 years, don't mess with Texas. Okay. And to show you that we are Texas too. We may be of a particular organization or group of people, but we are Texas too. Yeah. And so we're showing you, don't mess with Texas.
Thank you, Bishop Beatty. We have Jamar Brown of the Texas Coalition of Black Democrats. Thank you for being here today.
Absolutely.
Yes, indeed.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Jamar Brown. I serve as president of the Black Austin Democrats, which is one of the many chapters of the Texas Coalition of Black Democrats. We are here locally in Austin, but also statewide, a coalition of organizations working together to increase African-American political participation. And what that looks like is registering people to vote. What that looks like is making sure that people show up to the ballot box, what they're fighting us right now. What that looks like is also making sure that we are represented in the seats of power, because it also means that if you're not at the table, as we know, you're on the menu. And so one of the things that is very important that we have to recognize and that we have to understand this morning is this is not about voter security. This is not about increasing the vote. This is about suppressing the vote. This is about intimidating voters. This is about furthering policy oppression. And what we have to recognize also is right now we are at the state capitol. This is the seat of state government, where decisions are made about our lives every single day. How we educate our children in the midst of a pandemic. How people access vaccines in the midst of a pandemic. How to make sure that we hold the police accountable when black people are shot by police, right? How black women receive health care across the state is all right here right here. And so what we have to recognize as part of this work is making sure that we are increasing our votes, but making sure that we are fighting bills like HB 6 and SB 7. What happened last year? Black people and brown people showed up in overwhelming numbers across Texas and all across the country. What happens when you lose a game? You change the rules. And these bills are clear signs of them changing the rules and changing the narrative around who showed up to the ballot box. It's not just about voting, it's about who showed up to vote and who they don't want to show up to vote. And so that's what we've got to recognize, that our lives really are on the line in terms of our access to the ballot box. They are working to change the rules right now, and we have shown up as a multi-generational coalition, as a coalition of people who believe in faith, people who believe in justice and believe in equity. We're showing up because this is not a play just about voting. This is a play about power and keeping people in power that don't deserve it. And democracy does not only belong to people who want to keep a seat. Democracy belongs to all of us. And we decide who sits in the seat. And our right to vote is our sign of a decision that we're able to make. I tell people all the time that our sign of voting is like if you're on a nonprofit board of directors, right? You analyze your executive director. You give them a performance review every single year. And then when we show up to vote, we decide if we like what you're doing or not. That's right. And you don't have a right to decide that I don't get to decide whether I like what you are doing or not. And so that's what we're here fighting for. And we're going to show up every step of this legislative process. We're showing up at the calendars committee to ask those members to make sure this does not move to the floor, as it does not need to go there. We'll show up if it happens to make it to the floor. We'll show up everywhere, right, in the meaning of this, and we'll show up. But what we have to also recognize about voter suppression is it's about depressing a community and keeping communities in trauma. And that's what we're experiencing right now, that people have to take off school and people have to take off work to be able to be here to fight something like this in order We should be creating more jobs for people. We should be getting our kids in college. We should be getting our health care together and doing all of those different things. And so I'm honored to represent the Texas Coalition of Black Democrats today. I'm honored to stand in this diverse but multi-generational coalition because, as Robert talked about his mother, we're fighting the same old things. And our children are watching us. And courage cannot skip this generation, and it cannot skip the state and the leadership we are demanding in this state. So thank you all for having me, and we're fighting for every person to have a right to vote in this state. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamar. Another powerful sister, Coretta Brown with the Alliance for Justice, will come to speak at this time. Receive Coretta. President.
How y'all doing? My name is Coretta Brown, and I'm the president of the Alliance for a New Justice System. When we started the Alliance for a New Justice System, we began it for one reason and one reason only, and that was to establish a new form of justice in the state of Texas. One of the things that we need right now, I heard us all say a lot of beautiful things, a lot of powerful things, and so I just want to take this time to talk to our federal government, because we went to Georgia, we walked in Georgia, and we asked people to turn out and vote so that we can have a majority, so that Vice President Kamala Harris could be the one to be the tie-breaking vote. And we need to pass House Bill 1. We need to eliminate the I'm sorry, y'all. We need to eliminate the suppression, but no, we need to eliminate the filibuster. And that's what I'm calling on us to do. If we can eliminate the filibuster, if we can have our federal government do what we need them to do to eliminate voter suppression, it will help a lot of states out, not just Texas, but across the United States. People have a right to vote. Our ancestors bled and died for us to have the right to vote. It doesn't make any sense, or it's not any reason why we have to stand up here and beg you to give us the right to vote. So I want to let everybody that's going to be in the calendars committee understand that there will be accountability. There will be accountability. Voter suppression cannot pass. It must not pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Coretta, for that perspective and insight. At this time, any questions from the media? Any questions? Let me say, as we prepare to close this press conference and this rally, when blacks were brought to these shores in chains on ships and identified as slaves, Dr. King says that's when they fingerfied blacks. It was never the intent that people who look like us would have power in a place like this. When the 1965 Voter Rights Act was passed, people responded with white backlash then. When Barack Obama was elected, more backlash. And when Donald Trump was not reelected, more backlash. What we're watching is another form of backlash, because people have been angry in this country ever since we won and secured the right to vote. And we're simply here to say today, the way to remain in power is earn our vote, not to destroy our right to vote. It's a cowardly act to create a narrative that's false, to determine legislation that's voter suppressive, when you don't simply have the decency or the integrity or the willpower to figure out how to become what all people need. It's cheaper for you to try to take the vote as opposed to earn the vote. So the bottom line is, we're standing for voter rights today, tomorrow, and forever. And until you respect us, you've got to expect us. Until you respect us, you've got to expect us. Not on our watch. We'll fight for the sacred right. Thank you very much.
Does anybody need like one-on-ones or y'all good? Hey, Bishop. Dr. Haynes.
He's gone.
Dr. Haynes. Do you got 5 minutes? Bishop, where Bishop Dixon go?
Right here.
Oh, they're gonna do some one-on-ones. They're gonna do some one-on-one interviews with y'all too. Oh, okay. Hey, Bishop, hey, let him go first since he gotta go. They gonna put the thank you. I appreciate it. You gotta keep I'm here now.
I'm gonna see what they want. Let me see. Excuse me.
So I'm not even like straight package.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you for that.
Hey, Coretta! Dominique! I even need to say that. That just flew out my mouth. Coming down like, man, I'm from Yeah. You need help? I got to go behind both of them. Everybody thank JP for bringing the podium. Love you, JP. Hi, JP. Okay.
Dr. James Dixon,
Okay. First name Frederick, F-R-E-D-E-R-I-C-K. Last name Haynes, H-A-Y-N-E-S. I'm senior pastor of Friendship West Baptist Church in Dallas.
Your reaction we're just coming out of an election year. Why is this so important now to talk about this?
Well, because of the fact that instead of focusing on priorities that serve people, for whatever reason that we know, the Texas Senate and House have decided to suppress the vote and dress up, as I've said repeatedly, Jane and Jim Crow segregation in a tuxedo of respectability that they call voter integrity. And we know that's voter suppression because of what they are targeting or who they are targeting. And so we have come here to fight, but we've also come here to say there are real priorities out there, real issues that we need to be addressing. But sadly, we have a lack of leadership in this state, as was evidenced by what happened in February during the winter storm. No leadership. And right now we see continued evidence of that, no leadership. So what do? You make up a problem, you make up a solution fighting a problem that really doesn't exist. And so what you're doing is creating additional problems. Bad leadership.
And what needs to be done collectively to push back?
Well, number one, what we're doing today, we need to educate the electorate to say that what's going on is targeted voter suppression. What we also need our corporate neighbors to step up and speak out and withdraw support from anyone who is a part of this voter suppression effort because it's anti-democracy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you need another one?
No, I'm good.
Good? Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right.
I can get here.
Oh, man, I can't run that.
No, you're fine.
I got another meeting.
Okay, buddy. I'm calling. Okay, man, we'll holler.
There, and then you put that in your pocket. And then, yeah, I got got a reporter that's asking.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Do what you need to do. What's the third line?
Have you step over here? And you can look at me. For starters, can I get your full name and spelling, please?
Dr. James Dixon, Dixon.
And title?
I'm the president of the Houston NAACP.
So I asked this question before, but we're just coming out of an election year. Why is it so important now to do this?
Well, it's amazing that after an election year, we get all of this backlash. Voter suppression legislation across the country is an immediate response of backlash by an angered constituency who was so devastated by the results of massive voter turnout that they figured the only strategy is to figure out ways to diminish voter turnout in the future, and that's changing the laws. So if you can't win the game on fairness, you change the rules of the game in order to favor yourself and give yourself an advantage. That's a clear form of immorality and a lack of integrity.
So yeah, we're coming. It was the highest voter turnout. So like, how exactly do these bills that they're proposing will affect that change?
Well, the bills that have been proposed are designed to reduce the number of black, brown voters, those who are not a part of the traditional support base of this particular party. They've decided, since we cannot win with them voting, we can only win if they do not vote. So voter suppression laws are designed to ensure a victory based on a false pretense. That's not democracy. It really is not democracy. It's saying that since we cannot earn their votes on our performance, then we eliminate their votes while we are in power. That is absolutely a lack of integrity, and it's undemocratic. We've got to fight against it, and it's our sacred right. Listen, this is not about letting people vote. The right to vote belongs to every American. And so they're trying to steal that vote through coy and sagacious means, and the public is saying we will not stand for it.
What needs to be done to collectively push back?
Well, the collective pushback has to come from the streets all the way to the suites. That means we've got to make sure that we're empowering people at the street level and to act, because all of us have voting power, but we also have buying power. And we're willing to utilize our buying power to influence this process. Businesses need to come forth, and we applaud Delta Airlines and Coca-Cola and Major League Baseball and others who are coming out against these voter suppression laws. But others need to come in alignment with that. And I'm sure you're going to see soon, if we don't see change, you're going to see more and more protests, more and more boycotts, because we will use our spending power in order to speak truth to power concerning our voting power.
So that leads me to my next question I got. What's next? What are y'all hoping for?
Well, we're convening conversations with businesses and corporations across the state. We'll be giving them a report card, and we want to see, where do you stand on this constitutional right? Because if businesses continue to support politicians who are voter suppressive, then we'll have to decide where not to spend our dollars. And that campaign can become pretty sticky. We don't want to go there. We simply want them to do the right thing. There are Republicans in the House and Senate who should be speaking up right now saying this is a wrong approach and we refuse to support it. Not on the basis of partisanship, but on the basis of democracy, justice, and fairness.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can we get that microphone from you?
Absolutely.
Great message.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. Who are you with?
I'm with CBS Austin.
CBS Austin. Okay. You have a card at all?
Let me see if I have it.
Thank you. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Dr. Haynes,
are y'all selling these?
Nerd, I want our kids to stand close to this.
Several Zooms that they will.
Yeah, that's my son. You didn't recognize him, did you?
Yeah.
Let's stand close to this interview. Y'all, let's stand close.
No, they're good right there. They're good right there.
Let's do the interview. We can do the
Make
picture
sure
later.
Shakira Dennison is out. She's
Yes,
the main
indeed.
you.
Got to be. Got to be.
This guy.
The strong you.
Are we live? Okay. I am so honored to be here. We're in Austin, Texas, representing the NAACP Houston. And of course, we appreciate the work of our state president, Gary Bledsoe, and our national president, Derek Johnson. This is a watershed moment, and we're here fighting voter suppression at the state capitol. Every one of you see here has said something today about that and working toward that end. I just wanted Houston and the nation to hear from and to meet some of the people who are fighting every day to make sure this generation and the next generation has the sacred right to vote, speaking truth to power. Chaz, step up. You are with the Austin Justice Coalition, and you helped to organize this entire rally. We appreciate you. Why is it important that we came from across Texas to be a part of this?
Well, first of all, thank you, Bishop, for allowing us, and I really want to thank Shakira and Dominique for helping us behind the scenes. You know, we always organize together, and they really came through. But we think this is important. Like you said earlier, this is a generational fight. You know, this is something, like I said earlier, this conversation should have been done in 1965 when we passed the Voting Rights Act. But, you know, every year in and year out, here or at the federal level, the government seems to go out of the way to make sure that black folks, young, old, whatever, are left out of the democratic process, right? So, and we just can't have that, because we see, like in Georgia, and we see in the years of Obama, that if you give us something to be hopeful in, we'll turn out the vote. Yeah. And that's why they want to take the vote away, right? Yeah. So, and we can't have that. We need more and more participation from black and brown folks to be a part of the process, and that's why we're here today.
Shakira, you've said some powerful things today already. Give us a word as to why it's important that we get more people, young people in this generation, engaged in the fight.
Because I think history is most certainly repeating itself. I think, you know, the young man, John Lewis, you know, may he rest in peace.
A young man.
Who was a young man who started organizing young people to participate in this process. And history is repeating itself. Young people, we're organizing amongst ourselves on a regular basis. My life's work has been centered around teaching civic education and mobilizing young people to vote, right? And it starts with us. It starts with educating them on these processes and practices, both good and bad, right? They should understand that Texas has a part-time legislator. They should know how many legislators are in the House or in the Senate. They should know what the process is. And that's what we're here for. It's incredibly difficult, right, when you're at home and you have to get up and you have to drive all the way to Austin, to the Texas Capitol, to say, do not trample over my rights. Yeah. And I'm so grateful for friends in this work, as mentioned, Chaz, Dominique, Deanna, and crew, like Black Voters Matter, the coalition building and the partnerships that have been cemented that didn't just start today, right? And consistency matters, and us staying on the front lines to be empowered civically and politically to continue to combat these issues. We should not always wake up and find ourselves in this perpetual state of fighting. Yeah. Because essentially that's what's happening in the African American community. Young people's voices at the forefront of this movement is what it's going to take to continue to propel us forward. So I'm happy to stand with these good people and to thank them for their sacrifice as well, because we sacrifice, you know, daily as well to bring voice to these issues.
Dominique, in Dallas, Texas, you're leading an amazing movement there and across the state. And you look at here and you see these young brothers and sisters out for this cause. How long have you been in the fight, and what does it mean to you to see this generation here?
Well, as the president of the Next Generation Action Network, I created this organization to give a platform to the generation that is now into the next generation. And it was important for us to make sure that we organize when we talk about the legacy of Dr. King, when we talk about the legacy of John Lewis and so many others. Some of the things that eliminate out of the equation is how young they were when they were activism, how young Fred Hampton was, right?
Yeah.
And people forget that these were young people ready for change, and yet their sacrifice that they brought to us, we're still standing on that platform. And that's why we're here in Austin to fight like hell to make sure that we demand, that we make sure that our ancestors know that their sacrifice, it will not go in vain at all.
Yeah. And Dan, you talked earlier today for Black Voters Matter. And how old are you, by the way?
I'm 32.
32.
Yeah.
All right. And a leader in the movement. What does it mean to you right now that you're fighting the same battle that Fannie Lou Hamer had to fight?
I think that I feel encouraged because they laid out a path forward for us. But then I also feel kind of discouraged because for generations we've been fighting this same struggle. I remember being at the inauguration on the phone with my great-grandmother and her being so proud that, her seed made it to that moment. But now that she's passed, it's like, was the moment real if none of the progress was maintained? Right? And so I think that it's important for the youth to really be the voice of the movement. Like Minister Dominique said, a lot of the folks that made impact were younger than 40, right? And so it's important for us to feel empowered, for us to know that we are supported, and for us to support and encourage each other through this journey.
I'm trying to think of my sister's name. You talked about legislation in Washington, D.C. Doreen, yeah, come on. Tell us why it's important for us to even understand what's happening in D.C. and how that impacts Texas.
So it's important because the youth have technology at their fingertips, and they're seeing the habitual violence play out on their timeline every single day, over and over again. The coup at the Capitol was a double standard for the Black community. For the Black community to see that play out. So the next wave of voters are empowered in a way that our ancestors weren't in the same way, because they are seeing this unfold on their timelines live, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff. We say in our Good Gang USA in our church, exposure expands expectations, right? Who wants to speak to what you've been exposed to there, what it means to you? All right. Come on, Caleb.
So exposure does expand expectations. So I think that us being kids, we're able to come to the Capitol and see how, voter suppression is going on, how they're trying to silence our voices, so we can see, like, what we went through back in the day, and now we're fighting for it again. I think it shows, as a testament to us, that we won't give up. We're going to keep coming back, and every time they try to silence us, we'll come back louder and are more forced to prove to them that we are one, and we will have a right to vote in this country that we were given already.
Yeah. Well, I think this is powerful stuff. We're here fighting for the right to vote, and you see the generations continue to come. Generations continue.
Yeah, we got one more. Brother Deacon right here.
That's Deontay.
Yeah, that's Deontay. What's up?
From the community faith. Come on, man. We're talking about the right to vote. Yeah, man.
Yeah, come on. He got a question for you.
I got a question for you, Deontay. You grew up in the community of faith, and like Dominique, Minister Dominique is at Friendship West. Okay. You're at the community of faith, and now you're here in Austin in education. What does it mean to you to have been a part of Good Gang, and you're looking around now at this generation, yours, and this generation here on the steps of the Capitol, fighting for the right to vote and against voter suppression?
Thank you, Bishop, for the opportunity. I think it's a generational impact. I think it is cross-generational, as we can see, and sadly the fight continues. I saw Chad say earlier, there are several things we should be fighting for equality that should not be stopped at our voting rights. But however, we keep repeating the fight, but we keep showing up because we remain resilient. That remains in our DNA, that remains in our bloodline, and we continue to fight and we continue to be victorious.
Absolutely. Y'all mentioned how young freedom fighters were: John Lewis, Martin Luther King. I want to remind y'all of one more freedom fighter who was a millennial. His name was Jesus. You got to remember that Jesus died at 33. So everything he did that by age 33. That's what encourages me by this crowd here, because you're not waiting until you get to be 50 or 55 to get in the fight. You're in the fight while you're young. That's what it's going to take to turn this around. I'm honored. The NAACP Houston and statewide and nationwide is blessed to have leaders like these on the ground. Keep hope alive, in the words of Jesse Jackson. And as we keep saying, we will empower those who empower us and disempower those who don't. The right is worth the fight. Chill. Peace.